Well, this may or may not ruin your appetite because we're actually going to be talking about carnivorous plants. Now, these are unique plants that have developed interesting ways to survive in a harsh environment. Now, basically, carnivorous plants have 4 characteristics, and these are: they have to attract, capture, kill, and digest their prey. Now, a lot of plants actually attract insects because of their flowers for pollination, but carnivorous plants actually have all 4 of these characteristics. Now, their prey is not your finger or a large animal. It's usually small insects like flies and gnats, and even smaller than that. And today we're going to give you some tips on how to care for these plants. Now, you may see them quite a bit in the local garden centers because they're fun plants for kids to watch and also to learn about how plants grow. And they basically have some general requirements, and one is that they all need fairly bright light. They like a lot of sun. Now, it doesn't want to be in direct sun, but a nice bright filtered light is very good for them. They also like high humidity. Basically 50 to 90% humidity around them is the environment that they need, and that's why you'll see them a lot with the little caps over the top. They also like wet and acidic soil, and that's why a lot of times the potting mix that these are in is mostly peat moss based substrate, because it is acidic and it also holds water a lot. Now, there are some other things that you need to think about when caring for your carnivorous plants, and one is to always use distilled water when you're watering them. Now, carnivorous plants actually obtain their nutrients from the insects that they catch because their roots are in an environment that don't have a lot of nutrients. So if you water with tap water, this can actually hurt the roots. That brings us to another point. You don't ever need to fertilize your carnivorous plants because, again, that can actually harm the roots. The other thing is, when you first get your carnivorous plant, a lot of times they are in smaller pots. They need to be potted up. And so that's one of the first things that you can do, is actually repot your plant. Now, again, I was saying they like a soil mix that is actually peat moss and a mix of sand. And this is just 1 part peat moss to 1 part sand. And I've thoroughly wetted this down before I started potting up, because peat moss can be kind of hard to wet down. Now, you can throw a little bit of horticultural grade charcoal in there to help absorb some of the salts. And I've got about a 4 to 5 inch pot here, which is a good size for them. And then you just want to take and transfer your plant from its small pot to the large pot. Now, they actually can develop quite large roots on them, and that's why you need to get them out of this smaller pot, because they're usually root bound when you get them. Okay, I'll just take it out of the pot here and place it in our new home at about the same level that it was at, and then just fill in around with your potting soil. Now, you're going to want to water in, again, with distilled water, and just kind of gently around here, and you want to keep it about the same level that it was at in the other pot. Now, actually, a lot of carnivorous plants go through a dormant period in the winter for about 3 months. And this plant that I'm potting up right now is a Venus flytrap, and it's probably one of the most well-known carnivorous plants. And it's actually native to about a 50-mile area in North Carolina, and that's it. So it doesn't grow in a large part of the world, but it is a very interesting plant, and it's the most well-known carnivorous plant because it seems to be one of the more active ones. The traps that you see here are actually leaves, and an insect will become trapped inside here, and then it will close and digest. And actually, the leaves here are closed right now because it's actually digesting an insect. Now, if you have these in an outdoor area, it'll catch insects on its own, or if you have them, say, in the greenhouse or on the windowsill. But if you were to put these in a terrarium and you had a cover on it, you would need to actually feed it insects, and you can feed these about 1 to 2 small flies a month. That's all they really need. Okay, now I've got this in here. Just kind of shake a little of the soil off. I'm going to water it in with distilled water. And you remember I was talking about the little caps that are on the top. Now the reason those are on there is to keep the humidity high. But one of the problems with that is that it keeps the air inside stale. And they actually need some air movement even though they need high humidity. So how you can get around that is to put this in a tray of water and just keep the water in this tray, and that way it will actually keep the soil moist and it will keep the humidity high around the plant. Now another interesting carnivorous plant here is the sundew, and it's got a little bit different way of catching insects. And basically you see all these sticky hairs on here, and they actually look like dew, but what they are, they've got a little sticky substance on there, and you can see how the insects actually get trapped on these hairs, and then the hairs digest them. Now this actually takes about the same requirements as the Venus flytrap. It needs, again, high humidity and some bright filtered light for it to be happy. And another one of the plants that is actually a very pretty little plant, this is known as the butterwort. And this acts in a little bit different way. You can see it's got smaller hairs, and again they're a little bit sticky, and the insects actually become stuck on these leaves, and then the leaves kind of curl over the insect and digest them. Now these plants are actually pretty easy to take care of as long as you meet the requirements. Remember not to fertilize them, to water them with distilled water, and to keep them in a high humidity environment. Now you could keep them outside in a bright area, not direct sun in the summer. However, it's a little hard to keep the humidity up there. So they're really better for like a windowsill or something like that.
We hope you've enjoyed this classic from the Oklahoma Gardening Vault. Remember, even though these tips and techniques are timeless, there's always something new to learn in the world of gardening. By subscribing to both Oklahoma Gardening and OK Gardening Classics, you'll have access to a wealth of gardening knowledge, both classic and contemporary.